Welcome. I'm Sebastian Mahfoud, and you're listening to WCAT Radio, the on-air wing of En route Books and Media, bringing you the dulcet sounds of Catholic wisdom.
Chapter 3. To Be or Not to Be. Metaphysics. Things exist. You exist. You know that you exist because, if nothing else, you are thinking. Something that thinks must exist, because something that does not exist cannot think or be aware of the fact that it is thinking. Therefore, since you are thinking, you must exist. Descartes, a philosopher from the 1600s, made this argument, and it is a good argument. The problem, though, is that you can't get much past that. You might know that you exist, but there is no way to know anything else for sure if we start only by analyzing thoughts. If we start only in our heads and deal only with things in our heads, we will never get out of our heads. The main point is this: you exist. But even before you use logic to figure out that you exist, you are immediately aware of other things. There are things. Whether we realize it or not, existence is the first thing of which we are aware. If you think about that for a moment, it turns out to be pretty mind-blowing. The fundamental and primary thing that our mind grabs a hold of is existence. That is the common ground on which we meet the rest of the world. Existence does not depend on thought. Thought depends on existence. Being is the starting point for philosophy, not just thinking. Contingent versus necessary existence. As far as you can tell, none of the things you interact with on a daily basis had to exist, including yourself. You did not create yourself, nor do you maintain your own existence. Since you and the things around you did not have to exist, we can say that they depend on something else for their existence. To depend on something else is also referred to as contingency, and so you and those things are said to have contingent existence. Let's think about what necessary existence would look like. If something had necessary existence, then that would mean that it must exist. It would be part of the essence of that thing that it has to exist. If that were the case, then that would always exist, because it can never not exist. My own essence is that of a human being, and human beings do not have to exist. The essence of existence, though, is that it exists. That thing that has necessary existence is God, but we will examine God more later. For now, we will have to focus on the contingently existing things. How many things? So how many things are there that exist? None, one, or many? After all, you know for certain that you exist because of your consciousness. But can you really tell for certain that this book exists, that the floor where you are exists? Maybe you are sleeping, or maybe you are just a mind and everything around you is merely an illusion. This philosophy is called solipsism, and it is the idea that the only thing that has any existence at all is you. But let's remember that we are dealing with reality, not just making stuff up or exercising our imagination. We need to look at the available evidence and come to a conclusion. You did not make yourself, so you have to come from something else. Your perceptions are either coming from you or from something else. You cannot create and predict everything that you experience, so you must be passively getting information from something else or some other things. And there is no real evidence that you are the only thing that exists. There must, then, be other things. Another philosophy of being is called nihilism, from the Latin word nihil, which means nothing. And this philosophy believes that nothing exists. This is a problem because it also means that the nihilist, the person who believes in nihilism, also does not exist. The nihilist argues that everything is just an illusion, but the nihilist cannot tell you who is experiencing the illusion. Nothing can't experience anything, let alone an illusion. Nothing is not a thing at all. Nothing is no thing, a complete lack of existence. If you have anything at all that can be described in any way, then you don't have nothing. Thinking about nothing should help us to realize the infinite distance that separates existence from non-existence. It is not as if existing things were a little better or had a little more reality than things that do not exist. Nothing is not just missing a few parts, and nothing is not just a few days from becoming something. Nothing is the complete absence of anything, including space and time. Anyone who has ever argued that something can come from nothing is, at least, very confused about the concept of nothing. You can't picture nothing, you can't imagine nothing. If you try, you will end up with a blank space, and that is still something. We wanted to know how many things exist, none, one, or many. If we are honest about the evidence and weighing the facts, we are forced to the conclusion that many things exist. Metaphysics. This study of the nature of existence is called metaphysics. It is the most foundational topic in philosophy because anything else that we can talk about is something that exists, and it is sometimes called first philosophy. Metaphysics gets its name because the book that Aristotle wrote on this topic came after his book about physics. Meta in Greek means after, so this book was called the After Physics, or Metaphysics. Another name for this topic is ontology. We will come back to metaphysics many times throughout this introduction to philosophy. Even though we are discussing metaphysics so early on, do not be fooled into thinking that metaphysics is an easy topic. This branch of philosophy, like all branches of philosophy, can be very abstract. In other words, you have never seen, touched, tasted, or handled existence or the nature of being, just like truth. You interact every day with things that exist, but the topic at hand is not a concrete thing that you have experienced or can ever experience with your senses. Consider this question. Have you ever seen the number 2? Perhaps you are saying that you have. Can you point to the number 2 or make a number 2? I am speaking here about the mathematical number 2, not pooping. Maybe you are pointing to or writing something that looks like this, 2. But that is not the number 2. That is only a symbol that represents the number 2. Arabic 2, Roman numeral 2, and the word 2 are all symbols that represent the number 2. Just as dog is not a dog, but a word that represents a dog. So 2 is not the number 2 itself. The number 2 exists only in a mind like yours. It is an abstract object. Philosophy can be tough because it is like the number 2. We have to deal with words that refer to non-concrete objects, things that your senses have never come in contact with. Even though you don't perceive existence, you perceive everything else because of existence. Your senses and the things that they perceive must exist in order for there to be accurate perceptions. Existence is the fundamental condition for perception to take place. The things that are the easiest to miss are the things that are the most obvious. But if you miss those obvious things, the rest is disaster. Space and time. 2 more things are necessary for our senses to operate and these things to exist: space and time. In order to help us think about the nature of space and time, and as an exercise in abstract thinking, consider these 2 questions. What is outside of space, and what was before time? Let's assume for the sake of argument that time had a beginning. We want to know what there was before time. However, the word before refers to a period of time. But if time had a beginning, then there was no time before that beginning point. The word before has no time to which it can refer. The word before simply does not apply. The question is meaningless. St. Augustine acknowledges that the following joke existed in his own time, 400 AD. What was God doing before time? Preparing a hell for people who ask questions like that. As I discuss the expansion of the universe with my physics students, they always ask, what is the universe expanding into? This question implies that there is something outside of space. However, the word outside refers to one space that is different from another space. But we are talking about all of space, not just one area of space. Again, the word outside has no other space to which it can refer. So the question is meaningless, because the phrase outside of space is nonsense. Space has to do with location, and time has to do with change from one state to another, or one location to another. And this brings us to one of the primary problems of philosophy: how to account for unity and change. Some people before Socrates said that everything just stayed the same all the time, and change is an illusion. Some said that everything is always changing, but continuity is an illusion. Form and matter. Plato said that there are 2 things in things: form and matter. The world of essences, forms, or ideas, all synonymous, is unchangeable and eternal. And the world of the essences are the essences of all things: humanness, dogness, yellowness, tableness, cloudness, birdness, etc. The objects with which we interact every day are just material copies of the forms, and material changes because it imitates one form at one time and another form at another time. The problem here is that there is no way for the forms to impress themselves on matter if those forms exist in a separate and eternal world. This philosophy, fittingly, is called Platonism. Aristotle said all things are made up of both form and matter. So a dog is matter that has been joined with the essence of dog. A table is matter that has been joined together with the essence of a table. The essences remain unchanging, but the characteristics and the matter change over time. The essence of an object makes it what it is. Other characteristics that are not essential to the table, color, material, exact shape, can also change over time, and these other characteristics are called accidents. So as long as a table has the essential characteristics of a table, then it is a table, even though the accidental characteristics of the table can change. This philosophy is known as Aristotelian, or realism. A third philosophy states that there are no essences, only matter. In general, there is nothing else besides matter. Appropriately, this philosophy is known as materialism. The problem with this philosophy is that, as we already saw concerning truth in the number 2, there are things that are not material. Even if truth and 2 don't exist on their own, apart from a mind to think them, they still have some existence. So of the 3 options, Aristotle's philosophy makes the most sense. It affirms the existence of all the real things we experience, makes sense of change and permanence, and accounts for how essences and material interact. Self-evident principles. One last point. As we interact with the world, there are a few basic principles that we know are true as soon as we hear them. Every event has a cause. An effect cannot be greater than its cause. The part cannot be greater than the whole, and a thing is what it is. If you try to imagine the opposite of any of these principles, you end up with absurdities. There is not a whole lot more to say about these since they are self-evident, but the last of these principles forms the basis of our next chapter and the fundamental law of logic.
We hope you enjoyed the program and will join us back for another show on WCAT Radio. This is Sebastian Mahfood. Good day.